Well, good afternoon and welcome
Recording in progress.
Welcome to today's work session. Today is Monday, April the 24th, 2023. The time is now 3 p.m. The work session of the City Council will now come to order. We have 4 items to discuss today. Item 1 is Arts and Culture Advisory Commission Public Art Purchase. Item 2 is area-wide planning efforts. Item 3 is rules of decorum. And item 4 is committed funds / broadband. So let's go ahead and get started with Arts and Culture, the Advisory Commission Public Art Purchase. Who is going to be presenting today?
Joyce Miller.
Thank you, Joyce, for being here.
Babs, aren't you?
I'm her backup. Yes. She's
Good.
the raw
person.
Do what?
The podium so we can see you a little bit.
Can't see me?
There's arrows on the side there, it goes down.
Oh. Okay. Wow, okay.
There you go, that's good.
We come before you today on, I think it's a very exciting project that we have. We voted a couple of months ago to do what we call a legacy project, which entails acquiring artwork from local artists that have passed away. And so we got started with that, and we at the same time had an opportunity to purchase a Carol Bordeaux painting, and I think everybody's going to be very excited about this. So anyway, I wanted to show you, this is the that is the
Cool.
sketch. This is the sketch. It's a painting that is 5 foot by 6 foot.
Now, you have to remember, this is 5 foot higher.
Wow. It's
6 foot.
beautiful.
This,
Yeah.
so when we
5
tell
foot,
you
6
the price, you remember how big.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, we were, at that point in time saying, well, gosh, where could we put it? But we found 2 places here at City Hall that we think would be appropriate. One is right there, but there's even better one downstairs as you come in the door. And it's to the right, there's a horse painting or sketch or something there right now, but that could be moved. And that one already has lights and everything, so that it would be a perfect place for it. And I think it would be a great place for people coming in, they see it right away, that kind of thing. It is an oil painting, and okay, I've gotten to that. Okay. All right, and the good news is that we actually have enough money in our budget to be able to purchase it. So it's $9,000 for the painting, and it's going to cost another maybe $700 or so for the frame and the installation, which her daughter is going to install it because it's such a big painting and everything. They want to make sure they have it done correctly. So anyway, I just wanted to come before you guys and see if you had any questions or concerns or anything like that about it. I don't think that, I mean, we do have the money available, so you don't have to.
But you have to approve it.
Questions from council?
No, not really. I did have one, but
I would like to say something about this legacy. This one really excited us, is that we're supposed to be an art community, or trying to be an art community, and we've had some fabulous, wonderful people like, Willard Loudon and Clara Downing, and a lot of those you don't know, but they were really movers and shakers in Trinidad. And I hate to have them lost just because they died. And we'd like to have a place that would have a piece and say, this is what this man did. This is what this woman did. Here is some of the art that is in other places. And let people know that we are an art, that we appreciate what we have. We've got, I think, 100 artists in town now. I don't know if any of them are the old cowboys like the ones I knew, but I want to go for this.
okay. Now I remember my question. So when you say we have the money and the budget, it's the Arts Council that has the money.
The Arts and Cultural Advisory,
Okay.
in our budget, which was approved, there
Okay,
is funds there.
so we don't, the city doesn't have to pay you back for that then? You're donating it? Well,
No, it's yours.
I know, but it is, but it isn't. I mean, you could put that painting anywhere you wanted to. I'm just wanting clarification.
Unfortunately, no, it has to be in a public
Okay.
Trinidad
Yeah.
place.
And and I plan on putting it into our the walk thing that we do. So that it will be available for other people to come in. I hate to say it, but they'll be coming in the door and looking at it. But I think it's very, appropriate for that too. So anyway, if you all have any other questions or something,
Do you have any other places you're thinking of placing other pieces, or?
not yet. This opportunity came up just out of the blue. And so when we were discussing trying to get this painting, we said, well, why don't we do this legacy project? Because there's so many artists that have passed, like she said. And, and some of them I don't think have 5x6 stuffs, so it won't be as difficult to find a place to put it. But I just think that this is just such a good opportunity to do this.
Is the commission going to solicit other suggested artists that it can look at in the future?
We hadn't gotten too far with that, but I think what we're gonna do is, Babs has been here forever, so she knows a lot of the people that we're talking about. Maybe we can get a list and then start seeing about getting other stuff. Now, we might get lucky and they may donate, so that would be good.
And the Mitch, we'd like to work with the Mitch too, because they have a lot of very valuable paintings that are not put out, that Mitch has had collected over the years of other artists that until you see them, unless you're an artist, you can be blown away with some of the artists that are in the Mitch and that are not being shown. And I want to tell you, because last time I was saying about that art down at Kit Carson Park that I said was being ruined, you guys made it happen. It's going to be saved. It wasn't us. It was you guys. Karen Wolf, of course. But they're going to move it over to Space to Create, which you own, and put it up on one of the walls. And then we have people that will volunteer to repair it. So it won't be out in the elements anymore. And I'm really excited about that.
And we also expect to do a plaque for this, so that it'll give us a small history of the artist and everything, in the future. So we just wanted to share with you and see.
Anything?
I'm curious. You see a lot of things in the news lately with art in public being used for protest or just damaged accidentally. Is there any protective layer that will be over it, or is it just?
This one?
Yeah.
If you put it there, it'll be there.
Well, normally,
But we just
put
put the
it
painting
there.
like,
I kind of doubt somebody's going to come in.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
I agree with that, but
Yeah.
you never know. I was just curious.
And the downstairs section is, we could put it up a little higher so that it wouldn't be right in,
Mm.
and it'll be affixed from the daughter is going to go.
Lynette knows what she's doing to get it hung properly.
Question, if you don't mind.
Any others?
No.
Is there a possibility that some of these artists would lend pieces to be displayed publicly instead of having to buy them all?
Well, these are dead people.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, whoever's in charge of their estate. I mean, I think, that piece that you're talking about might be better downstairs than it is here. But actually, this room gets more people and more possibility of viewing than any place in the building. So
It would be something we could look at and
Yeah.
see if there's people who would,
I'm
or,
thinking that
well,
will-
like over at the library, they have a revolving display and they have the artist explain their art. And that's in a little tiny place that you can't see, and it would be far better somewhere that
More
you-
exposure.
Yes, but they do have for the artists.
Well,
Yeah.
when we were talking to Lynette, I showed her this place, and she said that would be a good place to put it. And the only reason I think she decided maybe downstairs would be better is because I don't think we have the correct lighting for it, but there are lights downstairs that you wouldn't have to fool. But if you all would like to have it up here, I thought that would be a great place.
I'm just thinking maybe a smaller, something up here because these walls are pretty, except for that.
Well, we're gonna go and try to find out. There are several artists in town that unfortunately have passed away, and we'd like to get started on inquiring. Now, I don't know, I think we're kind of blowing our budget on this one, but,
Yeah.
Next year we could possibly do something more. But I just thought this was a golden opportunity and a great asset for the city to have this.
Now, this painting, is it of any particular place here in Los Angeles County?
What do you mean?
The
No,
painting
I
itself?
don't think so. I think
It's
those
just-
might be San Cristo Mountains, I think, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
She painted it during the pandemic, when everybody was at home, and so Lynn said that.
I was just wondering, because if there was someplace that is identifiable with that, and
I
it'd be
don't
nice
You know,
to be
we
able to
could
put
probably
that,
say something like Thatcher,
I think,
where
something.
they put out so many cattle.
Yeah.
Or,
You know, another suggestion for the future for you would be, and like I said, this represents agriculture, the
Yes.
agriculture area. And I think that maybe something you may want to consider with other things that you might be doing, like paintings like this, is maybe looking at other industry that has carried the
mining.
county,
Oh,
the
yes.
mining forward.
Yes.
Just something like that, I think would be kind of cool, and even if you have to change it out periodically.
They have great railroad
There you go.
paintings. And we do have the Santa Fe going through with those big old trains.
Well, and then on top of that, the Mitchell, they have a lot of old pictures
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
of Trinidad and the way it used to. But anyway, I think that something like that would be kind of neat, something that would be revolving.
Well, I think that we would try to, variety, try to get some, different kinds of subjects and everything that would be available, but this just came up this year, and we thought that, would be a very good thing for the community, so that we don't forget the artists that we have here.
No, I agree. Anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Marcus. It's very exciting.
Now, I think that this is just a purchase order, after she gives us an invoice to make sure, I just want to make sure that that's proper. Okay, great, thank you.
Next item is our area-wide planning efforts. By Ryan from Stantec. Welcome, Ryan.
Hello. So I'm Ryan Gibbons. I work for Stantec. We are managing your EPA Brownfield grant. There should be a presentation that's up, but if that doesn't work out, then I'm used to speaking the old-fashioned way, just presentations. So there it is. So Donna, if you could launch it in presentation mode and go to the second slide. So if it's okay with you, maybe I'd like to give a little context
Sure.
of the grant, and then where area-wide planning is, and then just a light discussion on what you'd like to see with it. Okay. So the city received a $600,000 EPA Brownfield grant, and really what that's for is to help property owners with the environmental studies to put them back in productive use. And it's for older buildings, it's looking at lead and asbestos, and lead-based painting and toxic mold. For other properties, it could be petroleum that's in the soil and those type of things. And what this all means to kind of the layperson is those are hindrances for a property owner to return those properties into productive use. So this grant pays for a lot of the studies that, say, a lender would require, or even through your permitting process. That could save a property owner between $6,000 and $25,000 in just studies. But what you can do, could you go to the next slide, Donna? And I did want to go over what a brownfield is. I was saying a lot of times your older buildings, since you're a historic community, this really comes into play for adaptive reuse or retrofit type of projects. But then if you have vacant sites, especially when you're along active rail lines, that usually has some contaminants in there. And then if you just want to even redevelop the site, say like get rid of a building that no longer works for you, there's demolition where that could cause hazards in the area. So we call all these properties brownfields. Could you go to the next slide, Donna? Okay, so what you could do with the EPA brownfield grants is like, you promote those for your property owners or potential tenants to take advantage of that grant. But sometimes it's a little bit hard to do that outreach and to get people to participate in those processes. So one eligible activity you could do under these grants is do area-wide planning, which is like a downtown plan or a neighborhood plan, because then you can address multi brownfields at one time and come up with a vision and action plan put in place. Could you go to the next slide, Donna? So one thing, you've already laid the framework of doing some really amazing things in your town. I have not worked with a town that's around your size and has done so much already, especially from your streetscape improvements, getting the large developer entities to implement a lot of money in your process. The relationship you have with the state and the fact that the new rail service is being studied, and then there is opportunity to extend that down to Trinidad. Then you have property owners who are turning properties over for new uses. So in the area-wide plan that we scoped out for you, and I worked with staff on that, here is the plan components of it. So we're doing existing conditions analysis. We're doing a property inventory to find out what properties may have those environmental hindrances, but also what properties could be real catalytic sites in the future. So if you wanted to entice a developer or work with your existing community members, maybe they want to create one of those catalytic type projects, or there's a significant capital improvement project that you may choose to do. Through this process, that might give you a little bit of guidance on making those decisions in the future. We also have a big community engagement component, that's to the bottom, because whenever we start planning for your future, it really should be what the will of the people would like to see there. So could you go to the next slide? Okay, so here's the engagement plan that you'll be seeing in the upcoming months. So we wrote an engagement plan so that staff can follow that and also make the invites on that. The way that we structured it for you is that we have a working group, and that's a core group of individuals that are kind of rooted in your community that can give us advice along the way. We're also going to be doing a series of stakeholder interviews. That would be, say, like developer entities, real estate professionals, people who are volunteers in your community, your urban renewal and your Main Street type programs. We can have candid conversation with those folks so they can give us some more feedback on that. And then we have a larger community engagement event or a workshop that we're going to be planning in the next couple months. So on this first trip, I've already met with the working group a couple hours ago, got some really good feedback from them. And then that initial feedback that I got, that'll help us kind of frame those conversations with the larger community, because we never want to come in cold. We want to build on what we've already been told and build off of that. So part of that process, could you go to the next slide? We hope that towards the end, at the end of the area-wide planning process, you'll have some clear recommendations. So it's really more of a strategy plan on how you can move forward. And there's a way that the city can play a role, the other government partners, but also community members can play a part in that. So we like to do kind of two targets. There's what we call adaptive reuse. So that's how do you get new energy into your vacant storefronts or those upper floors of buildings. But then also infill projects, and that's those kind of leftover pieces of property that are kind of peppered around downtown, on how you get those to turn into more productive uses for the community. And then the revitalization tools that we usually work with then are, what are some regulatory modifications you might want to do to make it more welcoming for people who want to spend some money and invest in these properties, but then also tailor it so you still retain your historical integrity of your downtown.
Have you, on the regulatory side of this, have you had an opportunity to talk with Michael Yerman, because he's working with us, what he does? Have you had a discussion with him on that?
We've become good friends. For when we were doing the work plan, so we wouldn't have any duplications in that, and then anticipating what he's going to be making some recommendations for this.
Yeah, the other thing is, and bring it up again, we brought it up at council before, but there's that bill that's running through the state that the preemption of Senate Bill 23-1213 that we're keeping an eye on as to could circumvent some of the ideas that we have going forward that Mike's working on. So you might want to talk to him to see what his thoughts are. And And we'll know before the end of the session, well, by the end of the session, where that goes.
Okay. And then actually, could you go to the next slide? Okay, so could you go 2 more? I'm usually used to working my own slides, so thank you. Okay, stop here. Okay, so here's kind of the outcomes that we think are going to come up. So we have the regulatory framework, capital improvement projects. We understand that you are looking at some additional streetscape enhancements. How could some of this feedback and recommendations get filtered forward with some of those? And then also parks and open space, and then are your utilities working? That's one thing that, if say a new developer entity wanted to develop a catalytic piece of property, it's really good to get a sense of if you could serve that developer in the future, and then you can make some strategic decisions on that. Infill projects, so that'll be more like designated, what are those catalytic sites that really change everything for you for the better on that. So sometimes people, communities will designate, a downtown, not really designate from the regulatory standpoint, but work with that property and going, hey, you have a very important property. We would really like to work with you so something meaningful comes there, because then that's going to benefit all the other properties in the downtown area.
Now, is that concentration mostly in the downtown area, or is some of the outlying areas, like on the outer side, the outer areas of the central part of town?
It's just in the downtown area, but it does extend up to Colorado.
Okay.
So, and that, the working group had some really neat recommendations for that area where, it was more connected to downtown, but when the interstate system went through there, did make that disconnect through there. So yeah, we will be, and then also events and promotional activities. That is just a wonderful way to get people to come into your town, spend some money. There's so much to see here that you can't see here in one trip, so it's going to entice people to come back. So we would like to give you some strategies on that. Could you go to the next slide? Okay, so I wanted to come here today and just get some feedback from you. These are the main questions I would love to hear from you. Mainly, like, what are the biggest opportunities you see for the downtown, so I make sure that I capitalize on that. And then what should be added downtown? I'm thinking like land uses or amenities or services. And then also, what are some key properties or key areas of downtown you are really excited about us focusing on from a redevelopment standpoint? So if you go to the next question or next slide, then I'll just stand here for you.
What are some of the questions Council has? So you look at it in a very broad perspective as to what do you think the future of the downtown area should be like? What are we looking for? What's going to benefit this community?
I think this is very preliminary, but I think parking downtown, in order to get more parking without disturbing any of the historic buildings downtown. I mean, the congestion on Main, the 100 block of East and West Main and further out from there is getting to be an issue. So if we could find out how to make those 2 or 3 blocks more accessible and also make them more walkable.
Thank you.
Okay.
These are very, like you said, very preliminary, but I really like to see businesses downtown that will be places people can walk from their apartments that are in the process of being developed because of our housing initiative grant downtown. So more professional offices, some kind of clean industry, I think downtown would be good. Because all we really have downtown are a lot of service kind of industries. So I think it would be nice to have that. A lot of people come in and want more retail options downtown too, clothing, shoes, that kind of stuff, because we really don't have that downtown at all, other than secondhand kinds of options, and that would be a great thing to have.
So I have a question for Mr. Ruger. I think how is this going to fit into, or how do we make it best fit into and work with the upcoming RFP for strategic planning for growth going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about that this morning in our working group meeting. And what's terrific about that is some of the notes Ryan's collecting right now for this process can be handed over to the strategic planning consultant. So that way we're not duplicating efforts or forgetting to tie things back to efforts that have already been undertaken. So I think this is one process, and it's a pretty major process, obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
But this should flow right into some of the other things we're doing. So for example, the Main Street RFP that we have going on right now, I think some of the work that Stantec's doing for us can help that process as well. So we see all of these things tying together.
Yeah, I think it's just, I appreciate everything you said today, but I think it's just super important that the workflow is complementary to everything that goes, because then it's a multiplying effect and not a constraining effect. So I think that's just something that really needs to be kept sight of. So that's my input.
And that as well as the Riverwalk planning that
Yes.
is in process.
Yep.
Yes. I second that.
Third that.
Okay, we have a fourth.
A couple of things that I wish that we had, but I know where it would be, but the building would have to come down. It's about to come down by itself. And that would be a central gathering area right in the downtown area. And unfortunately, that would be that one building on the corner of Commercial and Main Street. And we would have to probably try to, I'm not sure if Dana would want to alleviate herself from that or not, I don't know.
She's moving towards redevelopment. on
I know she's working on it, she's been talking about that for some time, but nothing's happening with it.
Yeah, no, I think she's starting that process. But I will say when the Greenway Foundation comes down, they are mindful of that, and they have some suggestions I think that they're going to present to you all as well about downtown gathering places.
Because that's what I have heard in the past from other people that have come into the community.
Yeah.
And they said, you guys need a central gathering area that would be nice to.
Yeah,
Just public.
Yeah.
absolutely. We agree.
The other thing too, and you probably heard it, and we're still working on it, but we are looking at purchasing that property on off of exit 14. And we're looking at, if that goes through, the best uses for it. We've had some discussion on that already, but I think it'd be nice to find out what the best uses for that property if this purchase goes through. If you want an example, I can give those to you. I'm not sure, and one of the things that we've talked about is a new welcome center there, a multimodal center. And matter of fact, Councilwoman Aaron and I, we've sat down and we've had some discussion on that. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, what your thoughts were?
What I've always, my sense of that property is that it should be something that drives traffic downtown, people walking, biking, anything. And so that's one of the reasons that I've been supportive of having some kind of a welcome center there. There are some other options too, but I also, I think I mentioned, I think it would be a great place for a recreation center that's downtown.
One of the reasons for the possible welcome center, if we were to decide to do something, whether it's small or large, however we determine that, is because high visibility, because right now the welcome center that we have is not very visible, not very accessible to the going or leaving. And that is probably that's been my biggest reason for it, is that I think that if we have some sort of a welcoming center or whatever, that it needs to have better access in and out of Trinidad. And that's my reason for my thoughts.
You had mentioned Colorado Avenue, that that's part of town that you're looking at, somewhat away from the downtown area. So what the mayor just mentioned, that couple blocks of Commercial Street, that would fit into.
The other thing too is that Dr. We met her today, and She brought it up last year because she is part of the Rotary Club. And she actually, the Rotary Club is willing to help physically and I think with some dollars, I guess, to do something with that Colorado Avenue, with the center stripping that goes up and down there. One of the questions that was brought up, or one of the thoughts was, because there's like different pods as you go up Colorado Avenue, xeriscape some of them, use some with green grass, that way it doesn't take up so much water, because we're all trying to salvage and save water. To try to beautify that area because of the homes that are in there. And so it kind of encompasses that, like I said, it goes all the way up to Colorado Avenue. But that would be the other thing. And of course, our parking downtown has to be addressed as well. There's an area behind it on the old, the old medical place, you know where it came from?
Yeah.
And we own that property, which is on Second Street, behind there, and we've always said that that would be an ideal place for additional parking. It's close to downtown. And staff can give you the area, what area that's at. But I think that, we just do need to address, if we're going to get more people downtown, we need to have that, especially during events. People need to have that access to the parking. And I think that's one of our biggest deterrents sometimes, is that people come into town and they don't know where to park. And especially if the event is being held downtown.
Are you know where else I'd like to look at is LEE, to develop LEE site that more effective than it is. I know we have to wait for the remodeling of,
That project's about to start.
It is, yeah.
it is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, we're coordinating with Paul Glenn on a staircase in the back for Miss Crawford's building.
Okay.
But our side of the design is already done. We're ready to
Oh,
bid it
it
out.
is?
The other area for parking or something other uses is property behind this service station up here. The city owns part of it, the state owns part of it, and I know that we've been in discussion with the state if they will donate the property to us or whatever, but it's a pretty good parcel for parking or whatever other uses might be.
I really think too, the parking under the overpass
Yes.
really needs to be integrated. in
Somehow,
this.
sure.
So, I mean, that's ready-made, ready to go. We just
Yeah.
provide either clear signage, walking, or maybe even like the trolley, something like that, on event day.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've been to events in other places where even that's a little bit outside of the downtown area, but what they do is they will get people with ATVs and transport people in back and forth to the events downtown. So that would be something that I think whoever puts on the event, that if there's that additional parking needed, that they would provide that service coming into the downtown area, or even over to Central Park. Of course, Central Park has bigger parking.
Another thing we've talked about is trying to integrate the college in better to the downtown, to open up some quarters there so that it doesn't seem like it's on the other side of the world.
I know we had a presentation a while back where the roadway comes through town, and that would be something that you'll probably be hearing about if you've not already heard about it, but it helps with the college access coming into downtown area, because one of the biggest concerns that Dr. Epper has, and she may have mentioned that today, is coming across that area right there by McDonald's. It's not very accessible, or it's a dangerous area.
It is.
So it needs to be addressed, and that's a little bit different.
Well, a main artery from the west side of town to downtown to Commercial Street was cut off when they cut off Pine
Right.
Street.
Yeah.
You getting all this?
I'm
Just
just writing. Well, and my
see.
friends from city staff also.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Good.
Well, it's really nice. I mean, your town, I feel like all the stars are aligning. You know, so it's like my job to record all that, so we're all speaking the same language of it, and just kind of backfilling maybe the areas that maybe haven't been thought about, so it all works holistically on that, and then you can use that process to make your decisions in the future, whether it's regulatory adjustments, where you want to spend your money. One thing as an outsider that I noticed really quickly about your town, you enhance small spaces so well that really had a big input. But like our commercial, that little wedge shape that's in front of the church, how you handled that. I mean, it wasn't cheap, I know, but that was a relatively small thing that felt like it was a big impact. And I've just seen little examples of that peppered all through your downtown, so good job.
Now, I'm not sure if this is part of your planning or not, but, you know, these ladies that were here earlier giving their presentation about the artistry, the artists. And I think just figuring out a way to incorporate, because we're trying to become a destination for recreation, but also for the creative arts. So I think looking at that is how do we enhance all of those to become a better destination point through artistry, through recreation. And I think that's really important, because I think that is the future of Trinidad, is we've had so many ups and downs with mine and the marijuana, and so I think we got to figure that out. That's the one thing that we need to figure out, how to get people here, keep them here for an extra day or two, and get them to go back home and say, I was in Trinidad. You need to go there. Those are the type of things that I think that we need to figure out a way how to create that. Les, do you have any thoughts?
I don't. I mean, a lot of good thoughts, and I think you've identified everything that I can think of.
Let's get some thoughts. What are your thoughts, Steve?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out this map, which was also included in the memo that we sent you a couple weeks back. So that's our focus area, and so we do want to kind of just focus on that area for now. But I think a lot of things that you're suggesting came up in the working group this morning as well, so it's good to see that. And it's really been nice to get Ryan's perspective from an outsider, just coming first time here to Trinidad and kind of reminding us of things that I think we forget sometimes as well. So, but I think this process is going to be a tremendous help to us. I'm excited for the community involvement portion, where we can really get some great feedback from our community as to what they'd like to see as well. So,
Even Kim, she's a resident of Trinidad. She's a lifelong resident. Do you have any thoughts, Kim? Put you on the spot here, Kim, Get some input here. If you have anything any suggestions you might even have.
Not at the moment. Let me think.
Yeah. She didn't know she was going to get called.
I know.
Yeah, right.
Kim wants Friday night cruises.
Yeah, that's right.
Where's the bricks?
She was so filled in.
When we were growing up,
Yeah.
that's what used to happen.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
But I just think that going through this entire process, when you get public engagement, you get some additional ideas, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, I really appreciate your time. And Kim just said something for the kids, and that's something that a couple of the working group members suggested today. So we need something for our young people that keeps them here, keeps them out of trouble, and it's just fun. It brings everybody together. So
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that. Thank you for doing that.
Okay.
Well, thank you for having
Great,
me.
thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3, rules of decorum.
Guess who?
Guess who?
Yeah.
Guess who it is?
So, Mayor, council members, this is an attempt at bringing together all the issues that have arisen in like the last year. I mean, there have been a lot of things that have involved decorum, but this is, it was kind of hard to make it flow, right, as I was writing this. So I just want to say, I hope this is pretty comprehensive. I hope it reads okay in terms of a logical sequence. I do want to begin by saying, I know you guys were just given this on Friday, I believe it was, so kind of a lot to digest within a few days, especially since I've had so long to work on this. But I want to mention that Steve not only helped me, and I thank him for that. He made a couple of really good additions, but in section 2-15, we have that attached to the proposed rules of decorum. And that is the section of the existing code that kind of, well, not kind of, it touches on decorum already, especially paragraphs 4 in terms of the mayor shall preside at all meetings of the city council, paragraphs 9, 10, 11, really 12. There are a number of paragraphs in the existing code that deal with matters of decorum. And so this would need to be plugged into that code provision in one, well, in some manner, and that's something we can work on. But we want to make you aware of the provisions that already exist in our code that pertain to decorum. One last thing before I, have you guys ask questions or comments, but I want to say that these rules are not, these proposed rules are not only for, during meetings, both regular meetings and work sessions, for interaction amongst council, but also for the audience, for people getting up during petitions and communications, also people speaking as, not as presenters, but as people making comments during public hearings, right? And I think, not thinking anything, specific as an example, but I just think it's important to have uniform rules. And I would just like to say along those lines that when it's someone we don't agree with who is speaking, it seems like an eternity and, right, you know what I mean? When somebody we agree with, it's like, it's different and what have you. If it's someone we don't agree with, and this is kind of, during public hearings and people signing up. But I do think that, time limits, not talking about petitions and communications, time limits for people speaking during public hearings are important, because if you have a really, controversial subject or something that is, that has a lot of people wanting to speak, it can really get time consuming.
And I've got an idea. on
Okay,
that,
okay.
but I never-
So that probably is a good time for me to listen.
But that particular point is that if we give somebody 5 minutes, and let's say we have an item that's controversial,
Right.
and we have, let's say, 20 people signed up, that is 100 minutes. And so that's some time, and,
Right.
or let's say you have 30 people signed up. So what I'm thinking of is that maybe what we should do at the discretion of the mayor, that the mayor could, depending, and we could put a number in there, where it's 20 or 30 people signing up, we could cut that back to 2 or 3 minutes. Because that is something that I think is even done at the state level. They have that discretion, the chairperson, to cut back if necessary when you have a lot of people. As a matter of fact, just a good example is this one Senate Bill 1213 that they had 300 people signed up, and they gave them, I think, only 2 or 3 minutes, and it went on for 12 hours.
Wow.
So those type of things can get pretty crazy.
I had a question. Hypothetically, say you have a controversial matter and 30 people have signed up to speak about it, and someone signed up to speak about something else that is important. Would their time be limited too?
If I could, two thoughts. One is, on the controversial matter, it's tough because we don't know how many people are wanting to speak, right? And so I would say, if we think it's a controversial matter, right, we'll know generally because we'll have a full audience, but it's probably appropriate to ask at the beginning, how many people are here to speak on this? So that you're not limiting people midway through.
Well, the other way to do that is on our sign-up sheet, maybe we change our sign-up sheet to put a little note on there, which item or
Right, that's a good idea.
what they're going to be speaking about.
They do, yeah. It's a subject.
Yes, they do,
Right now.
put that
Yeah.
subject matter,
Right,
and that way we know.
yeah, yeah.
And that way it'll allow the mayor to look at, if there's 20 or 30 people signed up,
Right.
and you could take and, instead of pulling, because you might have a subject on one item and a different subject matter, But the mayor can look at it and say, okay, all these people want to talk about this item, so then he
Right.
can be selective, or she can be selective as to putting them all together,
Right.
rather than having them on one matter and then another one on a different matter.
Right. And I do want to say that while there is a place to list subjects, we ask people to sign up for petitions and communications. We don't really ask people to sign up if they're going to be speaking during a matter. So we don't necessarily know, again, how they're going to be.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, sir, I don't think, like if you have the controversial matter, you limit their time, and then you have another matter, and you have, like, say, 2 people per side, I don't think you would necessarily want to limit their time. It's a different subject, not as bad. That's just my thinking. And I do want to say, just on the time limits, like during petitions and communications, it used to be 3 minutes. And 3 minutes is just so fast. And as the guy who's always got to tell people they have 1 minute left, and I am universally hated when it's somewhat popular and loved when it's someone who's not on. Just kidding. Yeah, but I mean, 5 minutes, and I know Steve, of course, coming from Aurora, I think it's probably, in addition to Rio Rancho, but it's like in big cities, you really want to limit it, right? You have a population base of hundreds of thousands, so it's like you have a minute or you have 2, whatever you decide.
Well, the other thing that the mayor can do is when that comes up, and just to say, if you have a lot of people signed up, just to say, please, on your comments, if there's some redundancy, please try not to repeat, but also get your ducks in a row completely before, when you come to speak. That way, because I've seen that when I've gone up to, like, the state to talk to, like I said, I've spoken up in Denver at some of the committee meetings,
Right.
but I've also had time to talk with some of the legislators up there, and they give your time limited. And there's a guy out there saying, okay, it's time to go. So you really have to have your ducks in a row before you get there. And the redundancy thing is something that I think it should be noted as well. Go ahead.
Is the limit, the 5-minute limit, is that codified somewhere, or is that just something that we've chosen to do?
I think.
I saw it somewhere.
Yeah, I think it is in the code.
Because it would be good to say that, the general rule is that it's 5 minutes, but if there are a great number of people that we have the discretion to
Right.
limit it.
That's
Right, good point.
I think that needs to be added in.
If it's not in the code, we'll check that, but it should be specific in these rules of decorum, so we'll make sure we capture that.
Right.
And Mary, yes, you are correct. I'm used to, for public hearings particularly, the discretion of the chair being able to say, we're gonna limit the time because we have so many people here to speak out. And that's out of respect to everybody who wants to speak as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
The other item I wanted to mention is, it talks about the council and attendance of meetings, and I forget exactly where it's at in here. Let me see where that's at. It's in here somewhere about if the number of times that they miss meetings.
Yeah, that would be in the code, I don't think
It's in here, I thought I read that in here.
But under non-emergency situations, but that has to do with when someone can appear.
It's the last sentence of number 5 on the first page of 215, and it says, oh wait, never mind. Never mind.
But anyway, the item in there was that if attendance of
Right.
and that was my question, is the attendance. And it said that if people leaving, they should ask permission from the mayor. I need to be excused for a few minutes or whatever. It's in here somewhere.
Oh, Mayor, that's number 8. It says no member may leave.
Okay?
While the mayor is putting the question,
Right.
no member may leave the council meeting.
Right.
And the other part of that is the number of meetings. Here it is right here.
What number is it?
This is number 5, would constitute a quorum. Okay, it says here, the member of city council may participate and vote in legislative matters. Members of council may participate electronically during an executive session. Non-emergent electronic participation shall be limited to no more than 2 consecutive meetings and no more than 4 posted city council meetings per calendar year. So that had, from what I read there, is time that you can miss a meeting.
I think
Correct.
it's, no, it's when you.
Participate electronically.
Yeah, electronic
Yeah.
participation.
Maybe I'm wrong. But I thought there was something in the code that
Excuse me.
that talked about the number of meetings that council members.
Mayor, there is for boards and commissions. And so you may be thinking of that. There are,
Could be.
specific to that, I don't think there is anything in the code for council members missing meetings and what ramifications would be. In general, it's, you all are accountable to the taxpayers and voters.
And should that be something that we should address?
Well,
Or not really?
well,
Yes and no?
I don't, I'll leave it to you, but I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
We have a group that it's rare that anyone misses, right, on council. And I think the big problem with boards and commissions is people who are appointed and then have a change of heart and just don't show up.
Right.
Right, that is a fairly common occurrence. I did want to say, Mayor and members of council, that I was going to have these rules, these proposed rules, and we will, but apply to council and the boards and commissions.
Good.
But I didn't want to have, like I did this in the ethics code throughout, say, council and subordinate boards, or council, and it just reads so painfully. So Steve had a good suggestion, and that is have another set of rules of decorum for boards and commissions.
The other item that I was thinking about, and I think it'd be good, and they recommend this actually in the Robert's Rules of Order, is, when I put the question and I ask someone to, on a first on it, where they say, instead of saying, so moved, they recommend actually that you repeat the line item or at least partial of it. That's one of the things that I've heard, and I think it'd be a good idea to have that as well.
We tried that once and it lasted about a week and then.
So I think that would be my job in this particular case, to call that person, whoever is saying so moved, I say, would you please repeat it in full?
Okay.
I think that would be good.
I think that's a good idea.
I think it's a more professional.
It is.
Right.
So I think that that's something that maybe.
You're putting a lot of work on us now that you're
Yeah, that's right.
Why didn't you do this like
Yeah,
8 years ago?
It was all planned.
that's right.
Wow.
Anything else from?
I haven't.
I had
Go ahead.
other questions about
Please.
this.
Go ahead.
Okay. Under number 4, under the proposed rules, city staff, it says the last sentence, city staff should not engage members of the audience in conversation during regular meetings of city council. What if it's a simple matter, for instance, when somebody comes and does a petition or communication, and basically it's obvious that they just need to talk to a staff member and it's an easy answer, is it prohibited that just be dealt with then, or do we just say, please address your concern to the city manager or the city?
Well, and I think, and Les can correct me if I'm wrong, the difference is this is staff directly engaging the public. It's not the public engaging us.
But I'm thinking during petitions and communications, they do sometimes engage.
Right.
Right, so the public can engage staff, but this is saying staff shouldn't be going to the public for any reason during the meeting.
And I think something that you wrote in this here somewhere to address that is at the end of the petitions and communications, that some comments can be made.
Right. I mean, I hate to have inflexible rules,
Right.
right? Like, oh my God, that's a violation of a rule.
Yeah.
So I think there can always be exceptions. You're absolutely right, Councilor Truman. There are questions in, excuse me, very simple, easily dispensed with questions that I think we'd all rather deal with right then, rather than getting a phone call and a message and.
Yeah, for instance, the woman who came to talk about her sewer bill, I think it was
Right.
appropriate to say, we're
Yeah.
addressing that this
Yes.
I
meeting.
agree.
I see what you're saying,
I
yes. Well, we could make this a little more flexible and maybe say city staff should endeavor not to engage.
Right.
Or something like that, that gives a little
Right.
flexibility.
Or as a general rule, excuse me, staff won't engage the people speaking. But if we're directed by council, or if the speaker is directed to staff for an easy question, I mean, I don't know, something like that, right? Again, I hate to say that it's forbidden because it's.
I think what it's trying to prevent is and I'm not like throwing stones in any capacity, but sometimes we've had those situations where they come for public comment and it devolves into a back and forth amongst
Right.
the city staff,
Sure.
sidebar to us and back and forth, and that's really
Exactly.
what we're trying to avoid.
Well, we've had some situations where, the person speaking actually targets
Right.
a staff member.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that would be something that.
And that's our rule against here.
That's right.
And that would be the mayor's job to call that
Exactly.
person and say, would you please, address your question to
Exactly.
the mayor.
People have, like, what about that? Directing it to us and
Yeah.
really, that's right, that's what that is.
Calling names and all that stuff.
Right, yeah.
Well, not unless it's justified. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey.
Careful with
Yeah,
language.
yeah, I know.
Hey,
I'm surprised you weren't looking at me when you said
I
that.
was
You were
trying to be
thinking.
coy. I was trying to be coy. No, I have a question.
But
Go ahead.
I wasn't quite.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Number 6, the last paragraph in there about individuals wishing to address city council for an item appearing on the agenda should wait until the item's called during the meeting and they are recognized for the presiding officer to make their remarks. How do they let city council, the mayor, know they want to talk about that rather than doing it through petitions and communications? Someone mentioned earlier, should we have a sign-up sheet if they want to talk about something in particular? And then how do we regulate that
Well,
communication?
I think that, like I said, when they do have that little side mark, on the sheet sign up, and they're gonna talk about the streets, and they say, well, talk about the streets, but let's say we have an ordinance coming up on that. And it would be the mayor's job to address that and say, that item is coming up in another manner.
Okay,
You'll be
so that's
allowed,
how we do it.
you'll be allowed to speak, I prefer that you could speak about that at that time.
Okay,
That's happened.
and on that,
That's happened a couple of times.
and on that topic of public comment on ordinances, there was a time recently, I think it was specific to the tourism ordinance, that there were some people here who wanted to talk about that to city council, but because it wasn't a public hearing, we didn't take any public comment. And Mr. Ruger and I talked about that briefly afterwards, and it might be, I would suggest that it's a good time to have public comment at the first reading because it's not a hearing. We're not asking for testimony, but we're just trying to get a bead on how does the community respond to this ordinance that we're considering enacting. And that's the only time that they would really have. We don't have any.
Change it.
Yeah, so I was thinking that might be something that we would consider changing to allow for public comment
That's a good idea.
on the first reading.
Is that something that we can change?
I don't believe there's a legal prohibition. I think the intent is, like generally you have a work session where people are allowed allowed to speak.
Hmm.
Then first reading is kind of to let the world know that it's on the agenda and that action is going to be taken. And then, of course, you have the public hearing. So, but I want to hear what Steve has to say.
Well, I mean, do we allow people to speak at work sessions on items?
Well, sometimes no. I mean, sometimes no. True.
So I think it would either be, we'd want to make that concession at the work session or first reading. My concern is if something that a member of the public brings forward for your consideration that forces you to want to amend the legislation, second reading's a little late to be doing that, especially if it's a big substantive change.
Also, we don't put the ordinance in the work session. I mean, sometimes we haven't even seen it when we sit down to talk
True.
about it, so it's not public. It's not been publicly disclosed, the exact terms of it, so they wouldn't even really know other than general thoughts on the topic
Yeah.
at a work session.
So I think there could be public comments at
Yeah.
a first reading if you would
It's a
like.
good idea.
I do,
The other question, of course, this all goes to or council itself, is that before they speak, they're supposed to get permission from the chair. And I think that's pretty common, because a lot of times, I've seen where a council member may want to address the person right away, and someone else may try to do the same thing. So addressing the chair and allowing the chair to say, okay, your turn or whatever. I think
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Good job.
Exactly.
Good
Just like
job.
that.
So, I actually think that's a really good idea to do. It'll give the meeting a lot more order. Frequently I've noticed, and again, this is not throwing stones at all, but when someone may be having a line of questioning, it devolves to a discussion back and forth. I frequently do that, but I think it'll really help that. But it's super incumbent that you do it, and then also that you, the mayor, enforces it. But it's going to be a big ask because it's a big change, and people are adverse to change.
Yeah, the other thing too, and it's mentioned in here, is about, speaking on an item no more than twice. Basically you go round one and everybody gets an opportunity to speak, and then if there's any additional, that by the second time around, you should have finished your discussion rather than it going back and forth 3 and 4 or 5 times. And I think that's something that's addressable too.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
That was a question I had. Because speaking is one thing, but discussing is another.
Okay.
Because we do sit after, I speak about it and we go through, and then we have a discussion on it. So I don't know if number 10 is viable, that we can only speak twice. Because I think discussion among city council people is a good thing. I mean, exchange ideas.
And that's in the existing code, not the proposed rules of decorum, but you can change.
And that's even recommended by the Robert's Rules of Order, but I mean, if that's something that we want to change, then I guess that would be up to the chair to determine how long to let it go
Continue
on.
Now, Mayor, this does allow flexibility. It would have to be put to a vote of the council to allow someone to speak more than twice.
Who's going to keep count? Him.
Did it for years.
Yeah.
And a couple thoughts. So staff can help serve as parliamentarians to whatever extent you want us to. I'm not shy about interjecting, but
I guess one way to handle that is after everybody's spoken at least twice,
yeah.
that if there's any further discussion, that I could put a vote to the council, say, is there any further discussion, and does you want to continue the question, the discussion? And probably handle it that way.
I have a question.
Yes.
I can't find it now, but somewhere in this, did it say that any member of council can call for point of order? Or is
Yeah.
it just-
Yes.
So yeah, that's
Oh,
always.
yes.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
give me an idea or an example of what.
Well, I mean, somebody's being argumentative, or not argumentative, but, out of control, yelling, you could call for a point of order. Or, like we're just talking about, somebody is speaking, not asking to be acknowledged by the chair before they do, and you could say point of order. any of these rules can be enforced by a council member having a point of privilege, but asking for a point of order.
And that could be a staff member.
There's two
Yeah.
things, I'm still asking questions on this. There's two things that still bother me. The flow of when we're discussing things, it's hard. There is no flow when we're discussing things because it all depends on who gets the mayor's attention first. You know what I'm talking
I
about?
do.
Because I'll sometimes sit here like this for about,
And see, that's one thing that I started to, but then I had a question on that from a staff member to not do it that way. And that's why I originally had started to start at one end and go 1, 2, 3,
Right.
and then I was the last one to speak.
right,
And then I could do a second round the same way, that way everybody have an opportunity. And if there's some additional discussion, then that could be brought up by the chair to say, is there any additional discussion on this, and put it to a vote to council if they
Okay,
want to
that
continue.
might-
This way, it continues that flow that you're talking about.
yes. It's clumsy the way we do it,
Yes.
don't you feel?
Do you think that it should have to be put to a vote? I mean, if you guys are discussing and you're wanting to be heard more, it's generally all of you, not just one person, right? I mean, you're very good about when people can be seen and acknowledged to be called on, that all of you are wanting to discuss it. It seems like if you guys are going into discussion mode, that perhaps you, Mayor, could say, let's just declare this now a discussion and not limit everybody to 2 times.
You can do that too.
It just seems like that would be
But it
easy.
would be good, like I said, to follow, the order. Start at one end, move all the way around to down the end, and then start round 2, and then if there's a round 3, and at some point, if I determine that it's going farther than it should be, then I could put a.
We're not advancing.
Right.
Mayor, there's pros and cons to that, because, but yeah, I think that's fine. I think giving everybody that option. Most legislative bodies, it's exactly what you're talking about, Karen. It's whoever raises their hand and gets the mayor's attention
I'm
first.
the only
gets
polite
recognized.
one up here. So I sit here like this,
Yeah.
and everybody
Really?
keeps talking, and
I guess a good local treat is
Point of
forever
order.
raising your hands.
Yeah.
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 okay, I have another question.
You've had 2 point for.
Yeah. That's how you do it.
You're
Exactly.
junior, dude, so
I yield my time.
okay, thank you. On the agenda, and I'll use last week's meeting as an example. It was long. It was tedious. When, we, at the beginning of the meetings, we have a pretty good audience in here. But by the time everything's done and we do our council reports, there's nobody in here to give a report to. So I'm wondering, would it be proper to
Bad idea.
put city council reports after staff reports? Or not so much?
Well, that was addressed at one of the meetings that I went into, where CIRSO was actually there in Denver, it was in the fall.
Uh-huh.
And that was brought up, and they said, you can arrange that any way you want. But I think you're right, is to, so that the audience could know some of the things that we have
Yeah,
to report on.
And you know what, truthfully, especially last week's meeting, we were so tired that it's just, I had a lot more to say, but I felt bad saying it because it was late. And so I don't know, it's a suggestion.
And there, if I could please, Mayor, there was a time when it was proposed that segment be done away with altogether.
Yes,
Right, and I just, for history.
The mayor casts the deciding vote on that.
yes,
Yeah, right.
yes.
And, right, if it's a short meeting, then it seems like a, wonderful thing. And if it's a long meeting, it's like, oh man, I sure hope these go quickly. Sir,
Yeah, we went from
Yes.
like
yeah,
a full house Tuesday to by the time we did our reports,
right,
I think the only people that are left are staff.
right.
It's true.
And
Generally,
Benjamin
yeah.
and Tom.
Exactly.
This is not gonna work. If the public has a time limit, it may make real sense for city council reports to fit into a time as well. Because a lot of times,
Good point.
some people, especially on this extreme side and right there, tend to go on a lot. I don't know. I mean,
Good, I'm liking it.
there's no reason to have a 15-minute,
No.
10-minute. I think you should be able to say what you need to say. Even me, no.
Okay.
6 minutes.
2. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I think 3 would be adequate. We all do very short
Yeah,
council.
and usually mine, there's a lot of things that I encounter, but I usually try to keep it as short as possible too. And you have
Really?
to.
Do you though?
Help the other people.
Do you? Right, there's legislative updates, there's, something,
Oh,
yeah.
it's your turn now.
Count well taken.
Sorry, man.
Wow. Wonderful.
That's right. Yeah,
Anything
invite
else?
comment from the audience. No,
I did have one question that's, I've always wondered about, when you, Mr. Mayor, ask us if we want to move something off the consent agenda, if we're happy with it. And it says in our code that there's no discussion on anything that's on there, and sometimes we have questions if it's just like a liquor license that's for a special event, and there's been some issue that fire brought up or something like that, and then we're asking them, is that resolved? That doesn't seem to fit on the consent agenda if we're not supposed to discuss it at all. So I know it's probably straining at gnats, but I just want to know if we want to have any discussion at all about something, should we try to move it into
Yes.
miscellaneous?
And we've done that in the past, where
Okay.
you can always bring it up and say, I feel, when I ask for a change in the agenda and you see something there, you say, there's an item on the consent agenda, and can we move that to a different item, it can be under miscellaneous or whatever, new business, and have discussion there. And
But sometimes we have a discussion on something that's on the consent agenda, if it's a very small minor thing, like what I just mentioned.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering, do we always have to do that, if there's any issue with those things? Any questions we have, or can we have any?
Steve, have you seen anything like that, and where you?
Yeah, no,
How's it handled?
There really should be zero comments or discussion on consent. That's the whole point of it. It's one motion, no discussion. If audience members want to speak about something on that, they can do it on petitions and communications. But what I would encourage is, reach out to staff if you have questions ahead of the meeting, that if it's just a minor thing that we can answer for you. That's probably the best way. But if there's something you want to discuss, certainly we need to put it as a regular item to open it up for discussion. But
Okay.
just minor clarifying things, I would just encourage you all to reach out to staff ahead of time.
Yeah, there's
That's
been
great.
there's been a time or two where I've had a quick clarification. And
Yeah.
I've done that or two, but just,
Yeah.
I think it happened even last meeting or the meeting prior to,
Yep.
that happened.
One other thing, if I could please, and that is, when you have, like, let's say, items on the consent agenda that are, let's say a special event permit, or someone applying for a board or commission, it seems like sometimes it's required that the person be here, and other times not so much. Now, and I know every situation is different, and I get it, but you may want uniformity of rules in that respect, right? And it might be, kind of where I'm headed with this is, if you're on the agenda, you either have a special events permit or you're applying for a board or commission and what have you, that you have to be here. Otherwise, it gets tabled. I know you always ask, Mayor, if somebody is here on an item, and so do you want to have that as a rule? Or do
I
you
think
wanna-
so.
Yes.
Okay.
There's been a time in the past
I
where
agree.
I've put that question, and where we have actually, tabled that person to the next meeting.
Yes.
Right.
If I may, I think it'd be a good idea at this point to, and if I missed it, I'm sorry, but to compel people that are for an actual hearing to be here in person. I think we've run into problems where, when, COVID has caused a lot of things, and I think that's one of the things that has caused that's really negative is people view Zoom as a viable option to not be here, and it's led to the detriment of some hearings that we've had, in my opinion.
And that one was a disaster. If it's what I'm thinking of, it was people driving in a car on their way to the airport, and I mean, just the example I'm thinking of that.
Yes.
So that totally
I
makes
think this
sense.
would be a good place to compel that, their
Right,
physical
they have to be here.
And that was a regular hearing, no?
It was.
Just
You're
say if they
right.
can't be here, it will be tabled.
Right, okay.
But, Mr. Mayor and council, if it's something that's on the consent agenda, which is meant to be something mundane and non-controversial, such as a special event permit, why do we need them there? We're not gonna be
That's a fair
discussing it
point.
with them,
Yeah.
so why do we need them there? And then with regard to appointments to boards and commissions, we've already changed that so that we're gonna be talking to them
Yeah.
at
Oh, yeah.
work
Those are hard points to
sessions.
argue.
Right,
So-
Exactly, that's right.
right.
So I just think, I don't think they should have to be here if it's just something that we view as mundane and non-controversial.
But I think,
Withdraw.
like Aaron was saying, is that, whenever there's an actual public hearing.
No, I agree with
That-
that.
that's
Yeah,
exactly
no,
right,
no
Yeah,
problem with that. I'm just saying that.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
okay. So never mind on the being here on consent agenda items.
I don't
Right.
see why we would.
Okay.
Yes, but I'm sorry, but I just thought of something, Mr. Mayor.
We're getting there.
We're getting, I'm trying.
No, we're not. I started talking, then she said sorry and just
I
continued.
recognize Ms. Brady.
Age before beauty, dude. Okay, so if you're on the consent agenda and somewhere between posting the agenda and us discussing whether we need to ask more questions, how do those people know we're not gonna ask questions?
Bless you.
There can always be that exception.
But there could always be that exception. I mean, and if they're coming to council to ask something of us, then they should make the effort to be here.
Well, I think one way to curtail that, and that would be all of our jobs to do is, especially
Read it
for,
ahead of time.
is read it ahead of time on Friday or by Monday morning to say, I'm gonna have some questions on this consent item. And then wherever we can
Right.
have somebody from staff call that person, say, there's gonna be questions, you need to be here.
That's a good idea.
Could I say also, I think if Audra was here, she would say that special events permits are frequently really quick. Like the applicant comes in here kind of, let's say, fairly late, and they just forgot that, so anyway, they could be fairly quick. So staff doesn't have a lot of time always to really do everything, so they get it on the agenda as quickly as possible. So if you do have questions, we can ask them of the applicant and then let you know later on. Does that make sense? If they're not here during the consent agenda item, you have a question that occurs to you, we can get an answer and let you know if the person's not here.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, I yield the floor to Mr. Williamson.
I have one other question. Does this address, and I don't think that it does specifically, but does it address specific roles and duties in the sense of like, and I'm sorry, this is an example and it's not meant to call you out, but where it would be the city attorney's job is to, and then specifically state what you're doing, and outside of that, it wouldn't be considered normal course of business? I mean, should that be in
So,
the decorum?
no, roles of staff, I don't think are in rules of decorum, aside from what rules apply to you, apply to us.
Okay.
Right, ask to be acknowledged,
Yeah.
things of that nature, yeah.
So it's what's good for the goose.
Right.
Okay.
Any
Duh.
other questions?
Sorry.
Okay, anything else? I think we.
I don't have anything else.
Okay.
No, thanks for the
Good.
feedback.
Okay.
We'll get correct.
On to item 4, committed funds / broadband. And, I asked for this, and the reason being is that, we have that $1 million set aside that we've had for the last year or whenever we got it. And a few weeks back, 2-3 weeks ago, Mr. Ruler and I had a meeting with Comcast. And one of the big problems that has arisen, not with the money, but with, we know that $1 million was just basically to try to leverage other funding. But the problem has arisen is that because the city of Trinidad is pretty well capable with the broadband services already, that we do not qualify for getting that additional federal funding for any others for additional services if we go this on our own. So what we want to do is we got to get some feedback from you guys as to best uses for that money.
Mr. Mayor, if I-
Anything else
yeah,
besides
a
that?
couple things. So the actual amount is about $1,067,000.
Okay.
And so staff recommends leaving the 67,000 in for broadband for city efforts and just some things that James wants to do to improve our network and our capabilities, which would leave $1 million that could be reallocated towards something else. But I do want to point out this is fiscal recovery funds. And so there are only certain uses that you can use it for, and I can highlight some of those for you. So replacing lost public sector revenue, we're way past that point. Responding to public health and economic impacts of COVID-19, we're fairly past that point too. Premium pay, which we've already done for employees. Water and sewer infrastructure is one of the biggest ones that we can consider. Certainly broadband infrastructure. So there's really, there's a few others, let's see. So there's, yeah, I mean, most of the other ones fall under responding to public health and economic impacts of COVID-19. So anything outside of water, wastewater, we would have to really analyze that and make a determination that we're funding that project because of a COVID-19 impact. So unfortunately, there's not a huge amount of uses we can use for this. However, if Mark was here, and I'm sure Cheryl can attest, we do have some pretty significant water and sewer infrastructure needs right now. So that
Well, I think one of the things that we could do with this is, I know that we do have and we continue to get notice of that additional funding that's out there. To maybe use, let's say, half of it for some ongoing things that we want to do, but maybe still leave some additional funding in there for additional things that may come forward within the next, because we have until when to expend this money.
I believe it's 2025.
Okay.
Is it possible, thank you, Mayor, is it possible, this is maybe way out there, but in projects that we have going, like hypothetically, say, the First Street project, could we use that money to do the water portions of that project, and that would free money out of there to use elsewhere? I mean, just to leverage some freedom in using that money?
We can definitely look into that. Yeah. I think as long as it falls under the heading of water, wastewater infrastructure, and we're spending it directly on that.
Do we have any issues with any specific area in town as far as water?
There's a few issues. So the wastewater treatment plant needs some upgrades.
Okay.
We need to do our water tank rehabilitation project that we're asking for congressional spending on, and are looking for any amounts we can to fund that. Yeah. And then we have some unfunded mandates coming up that pertain to lead and copper as well. That may be an expensive price tag for the city. And then of course there are water mains and sewer mains that definitely we could do some analysis on, and I'm sure we could find plenty that need to be replaced or upgraded.
Yeah, I think that's why I said, I think that you had a good point there about how to utilize that money for something that's in the pipeline. But take that money away and use this money for it. But then at the same time, have an additional pot out there available, so if there's something else that also pops up, because like I said, I constantly get information from Bennett's office or Hickenlooper's office saying that or other offices, so they've got these programs out there, and I send them to Steve, send the staff to see if they want to apply for them. And if we decide we want to apply for any of those projects, like I said, they usually ask for a match. And then if we do have some additional funding for matches, available, then I think that might be useful as well. Good.
I think that before we would make a decision about any use of that money, I would like to hear from staff of the priority of those things, because they're serious issues. So that we aren't spending on something that could have waited.
Yeah. And just wanted to the previous question, it does say funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024. So we do have time, and then they have to be expended by December 31st, 2026. So we have a little bit of time to make these decisions, but certainly we appreciate the council's willingness to reallocate these funds. I concur that broadband's probably not the best use of this money. But we can certainly get a prioritized list of water, wastewater projects and get that to you, and any other ideas we can come up with out of the constraints of the funding.
Well, one of the reasons why, when we started talking about this, holding on this money for broadband was to give the community better broadband service, but at a more reasonable cost. And when we had that meeting with Gary Amelia, I think is his name, and I had him send this to me, and some of the costs that are actually available, and according to him, is Comcast is making some additional things going there. They're going to be doing some more stuff in this area, adding some stuff. But just for instance here, for 75 megabytes per second, it's $19.99 a month. For 200 megabytes, it's $25 a month. For 400, it's $45 a month. 800 is $65 a month. 1,000 megabytes per second is $75 a month. 1,200 is $80 a month. So there is already something in place from Comcast, if that's who people want to go with, to keep their costs down.
And Mayor, I do want to point out, we have other providers as well that have their pricing structure.
Is that
We're not
residential
sure what those
rates?
are.
Yes, well, I think it's,
Because commercial rates are
It's higher. Yeah.
way higher,
I have to check and see.
way
I
higher.
can get those. I call them and
Yeah.
ask them. Okay. But that was one of the biggest reasons, because I knew that the costs were pretty high. But when I got this, it changed my mind as to getting some additional costs to residents. Okay. Anything else?
Oh, well, no, I mean, just Mayor, we do have other providers too, so it's not just Comcast, we're covered otherwise as well. One of the questions that we had from an economic development standpoint is, let's say someone wants to come develop a data center here in our community, are we gonna have the capacity for them? And the answer is yes. Through our providers, we would be able to make that happen. Comcast is going particularly to be making some significant upgrades to their speed over the next couple of years. And 100% concur with the mayor. I think if we were to spend the millions of dollars to deploy our own network, the ROI on that wouldn't make sense.
Any other items for future work sessions that council wants to bring forward?
I have something.
Yes.
I think, and it's something that we should get consensus on, but with the sewer rates, the way that happened, and this is not pointing fingers at all, I think everybody from staff to council, we really did do our best due diligence. But if memory serves me right, I think what was the name of that agency?
Raftellus.
I'm so sorry. I can never keep it in my head. But I believe they did a rate case before and there was problems with them. I'd have to go back and talk about it as an aside. But my point is, when stuff goes wrong, and I think that went wrong, it's important to find out why particularly. I think it would be great to have a work session where we discuss that, determine how we got there and the best plan for going forward, how to not get there again, and especially if we can multiply the effect and say, not just rate case studies, but important decisions in general. This is how the results we got, let's make sure we don't repeat that error. I think it would be beneficial. I don't know how you would exactly corral that into cohesive discussion.
Well, I think one of the ways is that, when something like that comes up, and let's say we put out an RFP and that same company comes forward and they want to apply, And I think that council needs to be, the council need to let us know that this particular company did apply before, they did do the job, but they didn't do it well. So that way, because we always have that, maybe they might be the low bidder, but we always have that capability of saying no, because they had problems before, and we can allocate that decision to another company.
I think, if I could please, Mayor, I understand that, and there's been a lot of discussion recently on that. We just have to be careful if we're going to basically be kind of blacklisting companies. Just want to say that, right? And whenever there's a new bid, we have to kind of, right, I mean, we have to have very clear, objective criteria, and we can't, because it's kind of subjective. If you say, well, they did a job for us before, it wasn't very good. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I understand completely. I just want to tell you, we have to be very careful in government projects and government jobs and accepting bids, that we're not saying, well, they're blacklisted, they're blacklisted, they're blacklisted, you win, right? I know, my words, not yours. But, I mean, we just have to be careful, because you can have personality conflicts, all kinds of things that are not valid criteria. I'm sorry, I know I'm not helping the
Well, I think
conversation.
one of the ways is for staff to put forth real strict guardrails on any of these projects.
Mayor, for professional services, we do a full RFP process, and then there's evaluation criteria that go with that. And one of them is typically past performance of the vendor. So that's something we will work with staff to make sure that the evaluation committee gets maybe some more information about past performance, so they can make a fair evaluation when we're selecting those vendors.
Okay.
I have,
Go ahead.
anybody else? Go ahead.
Main Street Board and Creative District, I know from talking with Margie Grandelli, are considering merging, and I would like to, I think a work session would be helpful for that, because we'd have to also consider whether or not we would be inviting Creative District back as a city board or commission, because right now it's not. It's a 501c3 that's independent. And so I think the functions of those boards in Trinidad would be complementary enough that it could work, but a work session about that would be helpful.
Well, you know, this was way back in like 2014. That was before I was on council. I attended a meeting. That was when Tara Marshall was here. And there was some consideration of merging way back then. But then it didn't go that way, and then because they stayed separate. But we've had some discussion periodically about that.
I was on Creative District before I was on City Council, and I recall that I wasn't among the people who had that concern, that that board really wanted independence,
Yeah.
but it is now people by completely different individuals who don't have any history with Creative District. And, I think that might need some oversight by the city in terms of how the money that they get is spent.
So the
towards
biggest
creative.
question, I guess, is like you said, they are their own 501. One of them is their own 501c3. How would that create any issues for oversight?
Mayor, I think Margie's doing that analysis right now. We have spoken with History Colorado, so this is not without precedent. This has happened other ways. The benefit of maintaining the 501c3 is there's certain grant funding that they may be eligible for that we might not, but we may as well. So I think we're doing that analysis now, but I agree. I think it'd be a good conversation for you all to have at a work session to really understand the issues surrounding making this happen and the pros and cons.
Well, because we do have problems periodically of getting people to apply for some of these boards and commissions, and they basically do need to work together, and if they want to work together, let them, and just have some oversight to them, and it would create less problems for us to have two separate boards than we do have now, and we have one board. So I think merging them together, I think would be a good idea if it's doable.
Okay, I have a question, actually a request from the Urban Forestry Board.
we were talking about the grates and the old, where we had trees downtown. And they would like to have a work session with council to see what direction you want to do it. They're very unsightly. I don't know if it's premature, if we're doing something else.
We have our Main Street RFP that we're doing right now. So what we can do is ask our consultants to consult with the tree board and get their feedback and input.
Okay.
Because part of their design is going to be vegetation
Okay.
and landscaping downtown.
Okay.
Les, do you have anything?
I don't. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, I think that's it. It is now 4:35 PM and the work session now concludes. Thank you for your participation. We will see you Tuesday next week. Thank you.